One interesting question that people will oftentimes ask is, why do we teach on and believe in the Trinity? Sometimes people from cults or people who are skeptics or folks from other religions will say, that whole Trinity thing just doesn't make sense. 3 does not equal 1, 1 does not equal 3. And when we read the Bible, did you know that the term Trinity isn't even anywhere in the Bible? It was made up hundreds of years later. And if they say those things, that's absolutely true. But today, all biblical Christians are Trinitarian, and they describe to this doctrine called Trinitarianism. And I thought that word was just long enough to qualify for us for our big word of the week here, Trinitarianism. Everyone say Trinitarianism. Trinitarianism is the belief that there is one God who exists eternally and co-equally as 3 persons. Now, if the word itself, Trinity, isn't in the Bible, then where do we get the concept? And the truth of the matter is, the concept is written all over the pages of the Bible. We believe this first because Jesus himself claimed to be God. He's presented in Matthew as God from the very opening pages. You may remember all the way in chapter 1, there's this miraculous birth that comes about by the Holy Spirit, and he's given the title in the very first chapter, Emmanuel, God is with us. Later on in Matthew, we'll see him claiming to forgive sins. Not just a person sins against you, but a person sins in general, just like God would be able to claim. He'll later on claim that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. Again, a claim that only God can make. He will say that he existed before Abraham. Before Abraham was, I am, claiming to be infinite over time and space. It's a claim that only God can make. And not only will he claim to be God, but he'll prove it. He'll say this is legit, but he'll show it by curing blindness and walking on water and healing lepers and turning water into wine, raising dead people from the grave and predicting and pulling off his own resurrection. Friends, normal people don't do those things. Only Jesus does those kinds of things. So, over and over, Jesus presents himself as God, and then he proves it. Second of all, we have the fact that Jesus also relates to the Father. Not only does he act like God and prove that he's God, but he relates to the Father. In this passage, God speaks to him as another person. This is my son. In other passages, Jesus prays to the Father. He submits to the Father. He says that he has come to glorify the Father. So Jesus is God, but he relates to the Father. Then you throw the Holy Spirit into this entire mix. Jesus was conceived by the Holy Spirit. He was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. He drives out demons by the Holy Spirit. He sends the Holy Spirit. He appears with the Father and the Spirit in this passage. Disciples speak by the power of the Holy Spirit, and in the end of Matthew, we are taught that we should baptize in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So while the term Trinity is not invented until centuries later, the concept is woven throughout the entirety of the scriptures, and it just took human beings a while to be able to figure out what kind of a label we'll put on that concept that's very clear in the Bible. So the term is Trinitarianism, and if I were going to give you a picture of what that looks like, this is the best picture that I would be able to put together of it. Here we have just a triangle, and on the triangle we have the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit at 3 different angles. They are different persons, but one being. The being that they are is God, and so you have the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. But along the sidelines, they are not one another. So the Father is not the Son is not the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is not the Father. And this diagram here is the simplest one that I could come up with to explain the Trinity. It's the simplest one that I could come up with. In fact, people over time have tried to come up with lots of analogies to describe what the Trinity is. And to be honest, sometimes pieces of the analogy are helpful, but the truth is most of the analogies are also heretical. There's heresy that's in those, and we don't like to teach those. Just to give you one example, sometimes people will say, a Trinity is a lot like a person who has multiple different roles. For example, you could imagine the person, Mr. Incredible. Mr. Incredible. So Mr. Incredible is a husband, of Elastigirl, and he's the father of Violet and Jack and Dash. So he's got those two roles, but in addition to that, he is a superhero. And isn't that a lot like what God is like? You know, he's a father, and he's a son, and he's a Holy Spirit. And while it's true that he does play different roles and that God is the ultimate superhero, able to bend physics and biology and time, these things are helpful. But the truth is, he is not a single person playing multiple roles. He's three different people. And this idea that God is one God and has three different roles that he plays in this world is actually a heresy that's called modalism. The idea that God goes into different modes that are out there. And so the Mr. Incredible analogy just doesn't quite fit. In fact, the Mr. Incredible analogy fits much better the lead pastor of Christ Community Church, you know, who is a husband and a father. And my wife says I'm pretty incredible. So she says he needs to beef up a bit to be in my league, right? Well, it's the heresy of modalism, and there's similar problems with analogies like water or ice, or like the analogy of water, ice, and steam, or the three-leaf clover analogy, or the starlight heat analogy. You'll find many analogies that are out there, but the truth is, all of them fall short of a full explanation of what the Trinity is. The truth is that in this world, there will be mysteries, and the Trinity is one of them, that just can't be solved by the human mind. It's a testimony that God's bigger than we are, and that he's smarter than we are. And while the God of the universe can fully comprehend what humans are like, human beings cannot fully comprehend what God is like. God doesn't always fit our logical boxes. He transcends analogy sometimes. And we just need to have the humility to admit that God is bigger than us, and we can't understand it all, at least not as long as we're in the bodies that he's given us on this planet. I mean, God helping us to understand what his character and nature is like as like a physics professor explaining nuclear fusion to a second grader, or Michael Phelps playing in the pool with kindergartners. There's just only so much that you can get in that comparison there. But you know, I'm really glad that God is a Godhead, that God is a Trinity. Because it's only in relationship that somebody can know and experience love.